It's Jeremy from OpticHouse.com. Okay, so the first thing I thought about when I was watching this video is as I'm going along here in a second, you'll see a red marker pop up on the left-hand side of the screen sitting on the table. And it reminded me of that quote from Anton Chekhov, and I'm paraphrasing, but where he says that if a gun appears on the stage in the first act, it must go off by the end of the play or by the end of the story. And true, there's always stuff laying on my table that doesn't necessarily have any significance to the piece I'm working on. But it's funny to me just to see that red marker and knowing how important the color plays. There it goes. It's funny to notice how important the color will end up playing in this final piece. So right now I'm using a number 4 brush to lay in the holding line, which is just a slightly thicker outline around the entire figure. And it depends. Different artists use it different ways. For some artists, a holding line is very subtle and it's only noticeably thicker, or they just will use it thicker on one side to indicate shadow versus light. And on some artists, they have a very bold, cartoony, solid line around the figure. But this really is used, it's an artificial mechanism, because when you look at objects in the real world, there's no outline around everything. What we see in drawings as a line is merely the boundary between what is the object and what is not the object. What is it and what is around it or behind it or in front of it. But for visual representation in line drawing, we frequently, or artists frequently will use a slightly thicker line to differentiate that. And so the lines inside the figure and the lines of things that are in the background may still be of equal depth, but this holding line gives whatever the main figure is, a sense of form. It helps focus those objects. So as I went in and did the inside lines, I switched from a number 4 brush to my trusty old 00. Oh, and now here we're getting into the red ink. The person who commissioned the piece from me specifically wanted it to have this look of an all-white porcelain sculpture with just red from the wounds. And I was surprised at how vivid this is. Like, I know just from making art what impact, a blood red can have on a white or black background where it's just the absence of color except for that red. It's very shocking. But I was pretty pleased with the way that this came out. I tend to judge artwork by how much of a visceral reaction it can get from you. And that isn't to say that art should just be provocative and doing things just for the sake of the reaction. I think it's just the opposite. I think when you can do something that has sort of an honest feel to it, but yet when you look at it, you still feel sort of a gut punch, there's something about the juxtaposition of such a cute little character, doing this thing that's sort of like a spoof on Hello Kitty, doing this very cute little adorable creature, and yet having it grievously wounded. The first one having its eyes, tearing its own eyes out. The second one, ripping its ears off. Because the theme here, I showed my thumbnail process in my previous video for this set, and it's supposed to be see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. So doing these things of having really cute looking characters with horrible, horrible wounds in them is disturbing and upsetting. And I think when I can make artwork and I'm looking at it myself and feeling like, oh man, this is kind of fucked up. That it is. I don't know what that says about me. That pleases me when I can make myself feel that way about the work I make. Particularly because I don't go out of my way to make things that are disturbing. I try to make things that feel visceral, interesting, engaging. And when I mean visceral, it can be emotional. For instance, the film Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. If you've ever seen that film with Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor, that movie's about a couple of alcoholics, a married couple that just go at each other, arguing and bickering viciously. That movie is goddamn visceral. And it has nothing to do with people throwing pots and pans or stabbing each other. So viscerality, if that is a word at all, and it probably isn't, but if it were a word, viscerality would definitely be what I go for in my work, is something that can trigger an intense reaction, an intense feeling. And the challenge for me personally is to do that without it feeling contrived, or I can't think of the actual word, but just being provocative for provocative sake. Like, I want something to feel provocative because it's provocative, if in fact that's what it is. Whatever feeling it's eliciting, I want that to be genuine, but I want it to be powerful. The other challenge I found with doing these pieces is that, it's done in a cartoony style, and I generally do not draw in a cartoony style naturally. And I was concerned about trying to get that feel because I'm inking with a brush, and people that work with a brush a lot have great control over it, can get very smooth lines, it can make a cartoony drawing feel nice and round and bouncy. Whereas with me, most of my art tends to be kind of jagged and rough and scratchy. So I was concerned about doing something and trying to get clean looking lines because I don't generally draw a clean line. But I think that this piece, it came out okay. And it still has a little bit of the wobbly, shaky graveliness that my artwork still tends to have, but it captures the cartoony feel that the piece is supposed to have. The other challenge on top of that was that, particularly when I'm going in here and filling in these red areas, there's a lot of places where, forms are overlapping. You've got the hands over the body and the jaws coming from below the hand, the tongue coming out from below the skull, is trying to make these very cartoony shapes feel volumetric, because as it being flat, it's almost like an animated cartoon type piece where everything gets flat shapes and color, and that goes back to the whole holding line thing again. Making solid lines so that you can define the planes or the differences between forms, where one begins and one ends. That's it for now. Check out my website, optichouse.com. If you enjoy these videos, please share them. Also, sign up for my weekly newsletter to get a free digital download and see what else I'm working on. Go be creative.